Yeah, welcome to this video. This is coverage of the Sinquefield Cup. And yes, that's round 3. I know that's kind of oldish, but what can you do? I simply didn't manage any earlier. And so the round 3 game of the day is released together with round 4, basically, almost at the same time. I still want to cover that round 3. I don't want to skip it. I simply couldn't do any earlier. My current things that I have to do at my home just to take so much time that I couldn't do it any earlier. So here's round 3 game of the day. And for round 3 I will only look at that one game. For round 4 I will actually do it a little bit differently. I've gotten some feedback and I think I will at least briefly talk about for the 4 games that I'm not covering in the detail, and then look at one game on a deeper level. But for round 3, which is actually now not ancient history, but really not that interesting, I just do the one game that I found most interesting, and this is Carlsen with white against MVL, Maxime Vachier-Lagrave. So Carlsen actually watched my video from round 1. No, probably not, but he went knight f3. I said that I always feel he's better at home when he's not playing 1e4. So for once he went for knight f3, and MVL is going for a g6 based setup. He's a very regular and good Grunfeld player, so that makes sense. We've got g3 and now c5. Black is transposing into the symmetrical English. Here there are a couple of interesting move order wrinkles. It's, for example, rather important if white plays d4 here or later. One thing is, if he is not playing d4 now himself, black might get in d5. So let's say white would start with this, then black actually has the possibility to play d5 himself. For something like that, which would resemble a little bit the game, just with colors reversed, with black going for d5. So if white wants to play with d4 in this position and open up the center himself, it's actually a good idea to do it now. This is what Carlsen did. d4, takes, castles. Again, important move order detail. White now has 2 moves basically, knight c3 or castles. And one important thing is, after castles, black can play d5 and equalize completely. This is a case where the total symmetry is also total equality. There are some tries that white has come up with over the years, but they never led anywhere. So this is just equal. It's also very boring, but okay, at that level they are okay with the draw with black. This can be a problem in a lower level game where you want to maybe get a fight with black. Carlsen went knight c3. This is better because it does a good job in preventing d5. Now black, of course, can just play knight c6, which would be the traditional line, castles, and so on. Black will maybe take, and this kind of situation. This is very solid, but black has an alternative here that is very interesting, and a line that I've often recommended to people for stirring up some trouble. Queen c7. That's quite interesting. Black is looking at that pawn and really will take it. If white is not reacting in any way, let's say castles, then this can really be captured. And it's very questionable if white has anything near compensation, because black has lost time, true, but his pawns that are actually still back at home cover the whole 6th rank. There are no weaknesses that white's pieces can easily occupy. So I mean, this would be certainly some compensation if black had like a6 played or e6 played, but having not played the move is actually helping him. So this is probably not on. White has to do something with that pawn. The traditional move here is b3, if you can call it traditional. That line only came into fashion in recent years. Black has the funky move d5. That's really nice. C takes is
check.
easy. But what about the other captures? Bishop takes, well, looks bad and is bad because of rook d8. Yeah, and white is in a very awkward pinning situation on the d file. Knight d5. This is really bad. Knight takes, pawn takes, queen c3,
check,
loses the piece. Or bishop takes, and now e6 somewhere. Somewhere here maybe, and rook d8. And again, white is losing due to his double problem there of d file and long diagonal. So b3 d5 is tricky. It is not bad for white. White has this move, but it seems that black is doing quite okay there. Carlsen came up with something different. He went knight to d5. That's a move that has been tested before. And here black normally takes on d5. Something like takes queen b6, or give that check first, then queen b6, bishop c3. And here e5, for example, was a game Wang Hao with white against Grishuk from 2014. So that has had some prominent players already, that line. And it seems fairly okay for black. Yeah, I mean, white maybe has the typical slight edge, very slight, but it's nothing threatening really. Maxime Vachier-Lagrave, however, did take on c4 after a while. Interesting. Was he really surprised by the move? Not so sure. It should be on his agenda, yeah, if he goes for that line. Check. Okay, knight e7 check, king h8, and white, the bishop, the knight is trapped on c8 anyway, so white is taking here. Rook takes, castles. Yeah, time to take stock. What's happening here in this position? It's equal material after this funny sequence there of queen takes c4 and then knight jumping around. It's equal material, but white has the bishop pair and also a very nice centralized knight there on d4 at the moment. This is somewhat unstable though. Black has that bishop on g7. A disadvantage on black side is that the king is on h8. That means that quite often you will have to spend an additional move to get the king into the play. What we should check is briefly here, what happens if white takes on b7?
Check.
Oops. Yeah, you have not castled yet. So Carlsen, of course, castled. Yeah, so what did MVL do now? b7 is hanging now for real. So he went knight c6. That's kind of the obvious solution. Bishop e3, developing that bishop, and knight g4. I think that's a good choice probably. Black does make sure that the bishop pair is going away now. White really only has one move due to that combined pressure. This is the knight retreat, and now black took on e3. That makes lots of sense. Yeah, we get rid of that bishop, and now queen e6 and knight d5. Yeah, interesting. It's opposite colored bishops now. Those two are obviously opposite colored, and it's a question whose position is more active. White has the slightly more active position. He has got the knight on d5, and this knight is totally unassailable by a pawn. That's a big difference to black maybe playing knight d4 at some point, as e3 is kicking the knight away. So white is a little bit better here due to that fact that knight is strong. Also, white here has possibilities. I think we can put the next couple of moves on the board. Yeah, that's rather logical. Black grabbed on b2, white takes on b7 here, and after rook b8 there was the trade, and e3. Let's look at this position. One thing that white also has going for him is that if you imagine that knights might be traded in the future, then white actually can go with the bishop to d5 and has a very strong bishop position there. It covers the a2 pawn, sometimes can drop back to b3, and it looks at f7. It can actually put some pressure in the neighborhood of black's king. So this is a slight advantage also for white. The black bishop, however, let us unpaint there. Yeah, the black bishop is centralized on e5, but does not attack anything. It's this typical thin air bishop. Nevertheless, it's opposite colored bishops and it's equal material. So black's chances of drawing this position are certainly excellent. Rook b2 was played, and now a4 by Carlsen. The pawn was just attacked. What black certainly would like to do is to trade off the knights so that opposite colored bishops are remaining on the board. The knight on d5 is also stronger than the knight on e7, on c6. I'm sorry, that was a, how is it called? Freudian slip, because I wanted to mention the move knight e7. Yeah, this is in fact what MVL played. Not the only move though. In fact, after knight e7, it seems that he's suffering a little bit in this position. What moves does black have? I was looking at knight b4, trying to trade that, but knight f4 again is the reply. And yeah, it's a bit comparable to the game where the knight was on e7. Yeah, here if black takes on f4, e takes f is probably a worse version of the game, and we will see how the game unfolded. So queen e7, let's say, moving this. And here I'm not so sure how white is supposed to continue. That knight is covering those squares, and how is white going to make any headway? It's not easy. That rook on b2 is fairly active. If white trades with knight d5 or knight d3, I think black certainly can be satisfied with that development. This is maybe a better defense. I think maybe knight b4, keeping here the queen with queen e7, not taking on f4. It looks better to me than what MVL did. He went knight e7 as mentioned, and now knight f4 was the problem reply. The queen is attacked and it doesn't have a good square to go to. Yeah, if you, I mean, let's say you go here, yeah, you're running into this thing, or possibly bishop here as well. That also is very awkward. And where else? Yeah, I mean, c6 is covered by the bishop. Yeah, queen d6 is knight d3 again. It's, oops, sorry, wrong paint. Yeah, so it's tricky. It's tricky already. He decided to take that. Yeah, and that's not something that you play very lighthearted, because the pawn on f4 is taking away important squares, and you can really see that this bishop has a pretty long diagonal. You may ask, okay, isn't that also the empty diagonal, which is the thin air kind of phenomenon? Nah, here it covers some squares that are rather important, and white really has some opportunities, some chances to maybe get the a-pawn. And if that happens, that white wins the a-pawn, I'm actually marking that, it just has a long delay, then the bishop will be a very huge factor, combining the diagonal control with the a-pawn running. So white is a little bit better here. And the thing is that this is the very simple threat now. And what to do? There's also rook e1, yeah? Looking at those two. I think queen b6 is actually right, what he did. But it cannot really inspire much confidence. Carlsen now, he could have taken on d7, but he went a5. Why not? Yeah, black cannot take this, as queen d4 check nets the rook. So white is winning a tempo in a way, and after queen c5 now will take on d7. So white has won a pawn. That's certainly good news. However, I still think that black has rather decent drawing chances. Rook a2 was played. And now the interesting move queen d3 by Carlsen. He could have played queen to b7, yeah, as an alternative. The reason for this move is that after rook a5, queen b2, check, and then rook c1 is rather awkward. He could have played that, trying to play a6, but he played the move queen to d3. And here I was really surprised Black now has two captures on a5. Can take with the queen or I can take with the rook. If you take with the queen, queen d6 or queen d4 are both rather uncomfortable. Queen d6, for example, just attacks this, and where are you going? Yeah, something like this is not very great. And instead of queen d6, also the check and a possible rook move intending to checkmate there on b8 are rather awkward. But black could have taken with the rook. And I'm a bit I'm surprised that Vasilia Graf didn't do that, because I think it's really important to get rid of that a-pawn. The a-pawn proves to be, spoiling the results a little bit, but it proves to be the winner at the end. And it's rather clear that you should get rid of that pawn. Of course, there's a huge probability, that maybe black will lose the a-pawn. It's rather probable, but it's not clear that you will lose 4 against 3. In many situations, black will draw that rather comfortably. So I think he should have taken that pawn, but he didn't. Funny enough, I mean, white is better here. We shouldn't shouldn't paint things in too bright colors for black, but it's a rather better defense than what happened. He played king g7, getting that king into the play again, and now a6, and that pawn now is secured. Bishop b7 will always be a safe way to guard that pawn. h5. Yeah, what black is banking on is the fact that he's got something going on f2, but that ultimately white can address. Bishop to b7, right here, queen e4. Rook d2. Black can just stay. He stays on the second rank. Check. Back, and now queen e5. That's awkward. Yeah, the queen has a very strong post on e5. On the other hand, I mean, it's hard to tolerate it there. On the other hand, if you take it, then of course white captures with the f pawn and has straightened his pawn formation. Maybe with hindsight, MVL shouldn't have traded, but it's not so easy to not trade, to be honest. What are you going to do? I mean, the queen is attacked on c5, so maybe to b6 or something. Well, white can go here, for example, threatening queen e8. Not quite sure what black's move now is. The queen is very strong. The computer suggests this defense, which, well, it's not very human. It looks totally unattractive. That something like that was probably the alternative to the capture, which is what MVL played. But after that, it's probably lost. Yeah, rook e2, maybe not the toughest defense, but I don't really see him holding this. Yeah, like let's say rook here to attack that. White will just put the bishop on b7, keep that configuration intact, and white's idea is just to go around or combine that, say, rook d7, bishop d5, attacking this. As I said, this whole situation very often comes down to the bishop activity on d5. White has probably a winning position here, no matter what black is doing. Yeah, what MVL played was rook e2 and now rook b1. Just out for rook b8 or rook b7, the check first, or immediately rook b7, picking up the a-pawn. And once the a-pawn is gone, that bishop is a monstrous supporting piece.
Check.
h4, and that's it. That's the a-pawn. Yeah, and this is one reason why I was surprised that he didn't take on a5 because, well, you cannot really envision this precise moves, of course, but it's quite often the case that you want to get rid of that lone pawn that there is on the queen side, because that is a potential passer. Defending with a pawn down on one wing, like on the king side only, is quite often, in fact, possible. But if you lose that a pawn, the remaining a pawn on white side combined with the power of the bishop against the knight will be decisive. So I think he really should have taken on a5 earlier. Here it's a technical task and not really a difficult one. h3, boxing in the king a little bit. Rook d7, rook a1, and now g4. Yeah, a7 was also possible, but g4 does win, so there is really nothing wrong with it. Knight g2, yeah, rook a6.
Check.
It's blundering stuff. I was actually thinking rook h3, yeah, which is not exactly bad either, but getting
Check.
the whole rook is a bit easier. My notes had rook h3, but I was just seeing that rook d8 also is working. Yeah, so you will win the h3 pawn, and black after knight g2, knight f4, and here rook b3, black resigned. So a win for Carlsen, very important win for the overall standings of that event after his miserable start with that loss, a wide loss to Topalov. He has won 2 games, yeah, a rather lucky, or let's say the time scramble against the Caruana was a lot dependent on the time. Yeah, it was a huge time pressure scramble, and anything could have happened, but Carlsen was the winner there, and now he won that nice game against Maxime Vachier-Lagrave, having control all the way. Of course, you can argue that black had better defensive possibilities, but it was never really a comfortable situation. He was always in some kind of pressure after that opening had led to a slight advantage for white. Okay, I'll keep it at that for round 3, that one game that I was featuring. The other games, to be honest, weren't that interesting. There was a game, Wesley So with white against Grischuk, where Grischuk was worse, a little bit worse for quite a while, but then it equalized, and then pretty much out of nowhere blundered a decisive pawn. Really, it was really a blunder. Typical for Grischuk, it was a time trouble thing. So Wesley won that game against Grischuk, and we had 3 draws, which were the games weren't exactly short, but quite often nothing much happened. They didn't have huge highlights or so that are worth showing. I was actually thinking if I should show some of the other games, but in that video, but I feel like for a round that is gone for one day, it doesn't make so much sense. I will rather concentrate my effort on doing a longer round 4 recap video. Okay, I hope you enjoyed the coverage of that game. Thanks for watching.